Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I started this space because I wanted to talk about my napkin math models. I expect to be interviewing people on my YouTube channel about this. I think I'm going to be interviewing Ross Gerber on Wednesday, and that'll be published on Thursday. We're going to talk about the napkin math models that I have. In the tweet where I announced this space, I talked about 2030, 3 terawatt hours of batteries, Tesla products containing 3 terawatt hours of batteries, or Tesla products, including products containing 3 terawatt hours of batteries, at $500 a kilowatt hour in revenue, works out to 1.5 trillion in revenue, and 10 million robotaxis at $50,000 a year in profit per robotaxi is $500 billion a year in gross profit. These numbers lead to really, really high valuations for Tesla as a market cap and as a stock. So I'm going to go through these. But if somebody wants to challenge me on this, I would love to hear somebody push back and say, "Hey, Warren, this is what I think you've got wrong in your napkin math." So let me first dive deep into what I see as the first model, the battery revenue model. So the 3 terawatt hours is driven by Tesla's statement. Elon has said it, Drew Baglino has said it, that they expect to be producing products with 3 terawatt hours of battery cells in 2030. So that's cars, that's megapacks, that's power walls. By my rough estimate, two-thirds of the 3 terawatt hours will be power walls and megapacks, and one-third will be in vehicles. Um, don't forget that Tesla will make other products that will not include batteries. So, for example, solar panels and solar roof tiles, solar roof installs and solar panel installs do not include batteries themselves. And the net effect of that is that the solar panels and solar roof tiles increase the dollars per kilowatt hour of the power walls or megapacks that accompany them. So just so the 3 terawatt hours is an assumption. That's what Tesla says they're shooting for. They think they're on pace for it. Tesla won't be making all the battery cells. Tesla's aiming to make, it sounds like, 1 terawatt hour of battery cells in the United States. I think they're going to be making battery cells in Europe as well. I don't know how many. And then CATL is a large battery producer in China that has announced its plans to scale up production dramatically. LG Chem is a large battery producer based in South Korea. They have announced plans to massively scale up battery production. Panasonic is increasing battery production. So it seems likely that there will be sufficient battery cells down the road, assuming we can resolve some supply chain issues, mining issues, refining issues for all these battery materials. It seems likely there will be enough battery cells for this level of production. Tesla is the highest margin user of these battery cells, so they're going to be able to outbid anybody else for cells if there's a competition for cells. So 3 terawatt hours is reasonable. Now you could push these numbers and say, well, they won't get to 3 terawatt hours to 2031 or 2032. It doesn't really matter. The issue is, what's the long run value of Tesla? And if it's pushed back a year or two, does it really matter that much? No. If we're talking about $3,000 a share, it really doesn't matter. And I think, by the way, I think $3,000 a share, when we go through this, on some ways you look at this, it's actually an underestimate. I think I'm being very conservative in these numbers, particularly the $500 a kilowatt hour. So let me, and by the way, if anybody wants to chip in, um, let me know what you think. Uh, is that a comment? Oh, Daniel, thought I was on a quarterly earnings call with a mute. Um, so the um the $500 a kilowatt hour. If you can imagine a hypothetical Tesla Model 3 that sells for $30,000 and has a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack, that would be $500 a kilowatt hour. Now, the reality is the standard range Model 3 sells for $47,000 and has about a 60 kilowatt hour pack. So it's really more like $800 a kilowatt hour. I think I've got my math right. I think that's more like $800 a kilowatt hour. Some Tesla products are much more. If you think about a model, let's say Model X Plaid or Model S Plaid, let's call it $140,000. By the way, that $48,000 for the Model 3 is the base model. That doesn't include any options, that doesn't include paint changes, that doesn't include FSD, right? So just the very, very base model of a Model 3, the least expensive Tesla, the probably the lowest dollars per kilowatt hour of any Tesla, is $800 a kilowatt hour, not including options. That's for cars. Megapack actually is closer to $500 a kilowatt hour. I'll get to that in a minute. So, but if you look across Tesla's vehicle line and you say take, let's say, $140,000 Plaid Model S or X with a 100 kilowatt hour pack, you're at $1,400 a kilowatt hour. And again, that's without, options or anything. Um, and the Roadster will be high. Cybertruck might actually bring this down because Cybertruck is going to have a large battery pack, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see what effect that has. The future Robotaxi model, I'm guessing, is going to have a 50 kilowatt hour pack and cost $30,000. So that's $600 a kilowatt hour. Again, this is without options. This is without selling FSD. I think the Robotaxi vehicles will probably be required. You'll probably have to buy FSD with it at like, who knows, $25,000, $50,000. If you get into like every vehicle is sold with FSD at a $50,000 price point, then you get to really crazy numbers. But I'm just trying to be conservative to some extent. If you go to Powerwall, it's about $13,000 for a 13.5 kilowatt hour pack. So that's close to $1,000 a kilowatt hour. If you buy them in volume, I think it tends to come down to closer to $10,000 a Powerwall. So you're at like $700, $800 a pack, a kilowatt hour. If you then add in, oh, we have a request. Let's bring somebody up. Uh, hello. How do you pronounce your name?
Can you hear me?
Yes. How do you pronounce your
It's
name?
it's it's, fa- it's
Foibles?
Fables. The X is just a different. Yeah.
Fables. So Fables. I've been rambling for a while about my battery revenue model. Do you have any thoughts about the battery revenue model
So
or something else?
I do agree with pretty much everything you say, but I try to stay as conservative as possible. Um, I try to just narrow Tesla down completely to just producing 10 million cars by 2030. I don't really believe FSD is going to work as well as you think it will, as quick as it will, outside of the US. I'm not sure if you're aware of how bad European roads are. They're very small, not marked out very well, uh, and people drive a lot differently over here than the US. You have massive roads. Um, so I,
Right. Just to be clear, though, the battery revenue model assumes no FSD. The $500 a kilowatt hour, the $800 a kilowatt hour for a standard range Model 3 is no FSD.
okay.
The mega pack does not include FSD, and that's $500 a kilowatt hour, $2 million for a 4 megawatt hour
So the way
pack.
I
Go
the
ahead.
way
Sorry.
so no, that's fine. The way I worked it out was if they do 10 million by 2030, which I think they'll do way more than that. 10 million cars by 2030 with $10,000 profit on each car, and you give them the PE ratio that basically Apple has now. That is like my bear case for 2030. Um, and as well, is your stock price prediction where you think they will be, or where you think like what you think the stock should actually be valued at? Because there's two.
Oh, it's what the stock. I can't predict what. I mean, I think the stock is massively undervalued today.
Yeah,
I
I
can't
agree.
predict how Wall Street will
But I
value the stock. But I will say this: there is a chance that at some point in the next, let's say, 5 years, that Tesla becomes the largest company in the world and the market shifts. And sometimes Wall Street gives a price premium to market leaders. So if there comes a point where Tesla is the largest car maker, let's say they're making 10 million cars a year and nobody else is making that many, and they're the most profitable car maker and so on and so forth, at some point it becomes the default, right? Like right now, there are companies that won't invest in Tesla for various reasons. If it becomes the default investment, it could get a price premium rather than a price discount. But go ahead.
mm, okay. I do agree with that as well because I do believe Apple gets a premium for essentially not growing much. They just have flat iPhone sales, a consistent revenue that comes in.
Right.
Um,
General Electric was a great example of that in the past. General Electric had a price premium for years because it was the big dog.
okay.
So your model, you get 10 million cars. So you're doing a different napkin math. I think Gary Black just did something similar to this in a tweet.
So
10
yeah,
million
so
cars.
I don't 10 million cars, $10,000 profit per car, and then you slap an Apple-esque PE ratio on it. And that is meant to take into account every year something seems to happen. Whereas like there's a Berlin slowdown or there's a China shutdown. There's always something every year that knocks Tesla back. So I think if you give even further bearish numbers, it kind of accounts for that, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just trying to do the math. So 10 million cars, $10,000 gross profit a car or net profit a car?
Net profit.
Okay, because I think I don't think that's necessarily crazy, but that might be a little high for net profit. But that would get you to $100 billion in net profit. Do I have
Yeah,
my math right?
yeah,
And then the PE ratio is up in the air. If you give it a 30 PE ratio, then you've got a $3 trillion market cap. Is my
yeah,
math right?
yeah. That's right.
Which is 5x from where it is today.
Exactly.
Five or four, 4 or 5x from where it is today.
Yeah, I think the
So
stock's at 200 now.
so
So
but you also left out Tesla Energy.
yeah,
You have 10 million cars with
yeah.
no Tesla Energy, and
I'm
you know,
assuming that again, it shouldn't be difficult for them to make a really tidy profit on that side of the business, but it should. I'm just leaving everything out but cars, just so there's like a solid base of I can expect to 5x my money by 2030, and anything else is a bonus.
so
I don't.
basically, if Tesla only achieves half of their target for cars and stops making Tesla Energy products and doesn't achieve FSD and doesn't do anything with bot and doesn't do anything with AI training, if they accomplish nothing except half of their vehicle goal and everything else falls apart,
Yeah,
the stock still 5x's.
exactly.
Okay, I'm really depressed about that.
But
So,
I'm
so
still
just to be
I'm
clear,
still
just to
ecstatic with
just
that. This
just
is
to be
like,
clear though, just be clear, the Megapack factory is ramping. The
yeah,
demand for Megapack is off the charts. If you order a Megapack today, deliveries in 2024 or 2025. Um, Powerwalls should be ramping shortly. The thing that's been holding back Megapack and Powerwall is they've been waiting for CATL to ramp lithium iron phosphate production. CATL apparently has now achieved the levels of lithium iron phosphate battery cell production needed to get going. And Tesla said in the last earnings call that they're going to start making iron phosphate batteries in the US. That's how I interpreted what they said. I'm not saying they actually said it, but it sounded like they were saying they're going to make iron phosphate cells in the US as well.
I think they'll need to if they want to have the absurd amount of robotaxis they want to. I don't think
No,
they
it's
can.
it's just that the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits gives such a huge incentive to producing batteries in America to the producer of the batteries that it would be insane for Tesla not to, because basically the expectation is that the long run cost of lithium iron phosphate cells when you manufacture them at scale may reach like go down as low as $40 a kilowatt hour, or let's say $50 a kilowatt hour. If
Mm,
you're going to give $35 tax credit on a $50 a kilowatt hour cell, you're basically making, now your cells are only $15 a kilowatt hour, and you'd be nuts not to make those cells. And then there's another $10 a kilowatt hour if they go on cars. There's another $10. I don't know if this applies. There's something about putting them in the modules or packs that there was another $10 an hour credit. I don't know if that only applies to vehicles, if that applies to power walls and mega packs too. I have to look that up now. So anyway, so let me thank you. Let me see who else. I'm going to invite other people up. I see Christian, one of my favorites, is here. Christian is has something he wanted to say, and then Colin, I'll get to you in a minute. Christian, what's on your mind?
Nothing is going on my mind, but just to stick on your topic, um, no, I love your model. I've seen your videos on it. They're well done. The only thing I would kind of just, it's not even a pushback, but just kind of put it more the way I think about it and the way I've said FX bulls. If you think of it like we just thought about it and we said, okay, what's the worst case scenario if none of this stuff happens? It still gives you, that's not my base case, but that gives you kind of a framework of where to judge it, of what could this company be if everything kind of goes wrong, and like that. And the only thing I'll push back on is, what if um, like Elon talked about the last interview, he said we might have to get into mining. So my question to you would be, does that give you any concern short term if Elon is thinking maybe he can't get all the batteries to do all this stuff and that Tesla is going to actively have to get into the mining business? Does that throw up any type of a little red flag in that model?
No, I honestly think Tesla will get into mining. I think that if you watch Drew Baglino at Stanford, I did a video about it, but you watch Drew Baglino at Stanford, there's this moment where he talked about the supply chain for battery cells today was not created for making battery cells. Like the battery cell, it was the lithium ion batteries, like all the materials that go into lithium ion batteries are just sort of like byproducts of some other industrial process. And so the supply chain that exists for electric vehicles and particularly for batteries is not optimized for this. And Elon was actually asked about this in the call. One of the analysts said, "Does that give you like $100 billion investment?" And Elon said it's going to be a lot less. And I think what's coming with Master Plan Part 3, which is probably going to be pushed back because of the Twitter acquisition, and not that the announcement of Master Plan Part 3 is probably going to be pushed back. I don't think there's any question that Drew and Lars and the Tesla team already knows what Master Plan 3 is, that they have to change the dynamics of the supply chain for battery cells to get there. And if that means that Tesla, they're probably working with miners to say, hey, this is what we need you to do, but it may need revolutionary change in mining, and the mining industry may not be up for that revolutionary change. So I think it's primarily lithium right now that's the issue, but I think nickel is less of an issue because so much of the battery cells are going to be iron phosphate cells that those materials are widely available. So lithium is probably the big holdup. That's why they're building. And look, they're building a lithium refining facility, right? They're unequivocally building a lithium refining facility in Corpus Christi. So, but I want to. Sorry. Let me give Colin a chance. Colin, go ahead. What did you want to say?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So I wanted to kind of ask on your thoughts on Elon Musk when he had this interview with Ron Barron a few days ago, um, about one of the people were one of the person asked him, um, why would I invest in Tesla when their PE is so high versus like Mercedes? Um, and that to me, his answer was really great, where he said, like with the robotaxis, like a 5x more value for the same cost of the car. That it still costs the same to build the car, versus like there's more utilization on the car. And so my question is like, if it's 5x just the car alone, and we're looking at the price where it is right now, would that would almost entail that a 5x alone just from the robotaxi, not including the Tesla bot, which he did mention as well. And he completely left out Tesla Energy, which is where I think it's going to make Tesla worth even more, a little over 3,000, like probably like 6,000 in my opinion, by the time like 2030 rolls around, just based on like what's going on in Ukraine and everything with like the energy crisis. It just seems kind of like with that going on, it's almost like just pushing renewable energy even faster forward. Now, granted, we do need oil like currently, but I think that just is like a tailwind for Tesla. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say.
I didn't love his answer to that question, but I understand Elon has his way of doing things, and I'm not going to be critical of it. But the really simple answer to the question was Tesla's growing and Mercedes isn't. Tesla is growing, 50% a year in terms of vehicle deliveries, revenue, and profit. I think profit is actually growing more than 50% a year by quite a bit. The legacy automakers are shrinking. So the real reason that the stock price is, the price earnings ratio is higher is because companies that are growing have higher price earnings ratios. Companies that are shrinking have low price earnings ratios. I don't think that the current PE ratio is related much at all to Robotaxi or Bot or any of that, or Tesla Energy for that matter. I think if you read most Wall Street analysts' reports, and I think a lot of Wall Street follows this stuff, they don't really count much for Tesla Energy. They don't really count much for this other stuff. And I just want to point out, if you follow what they just published about Megapack, they just Tesla did a video today and a reply tweet to their own video today. I think the video was not new, but they tweeted a video today. They tweeted a reply to the video today about the Mega Factory, that it's going to be producing 10,000 units of Megapacks a year. Those are $2 million a piece. That's average, or probably it's probably a little less more than average, because if you buy one, it's 2.4 million. If you buy 10, it might be like 1.6 million a piece. So I don't know how you figure out, and then who knows what they're doing in terms of deal making. But if you just ballpark and say, all right, 10,000 units times $2 million, you get $20 billion a year in revenue. That would be 25% of 2022 revenue, and that doesn't include Powerwall and solar, which my general sense is that Powerwall and solar are going to start ramping. So I don't think Tesla Energy will be 25% of revenue in 2023, but it might be more than 10% of revenue in 2023, and it's growing faster. So we're going to see Tesla Energy in 2024 or 2025, unless Robotaxi comes in and totally changes the game. Um, it's going to start approaching 30, 40, 50% of revenue within a few years. And we don't even, the Wall Street analysts don't even talk about that. So let me give
Yeah, just real
Tesla
quick.
talk.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
say one last thing. I just feel like I want to get your opinion on this with Elon. Like, just basically, I always feel like he sells Tesla short. And I feel like when he gets asked, like, I know he doesn't want to tell people, yeah, invest in the stock, and like he doesn't want to seem like he's trying to pump it, which I don't think he is. But like, I also feel he sells Tesla short a lot of the times where he's talking to an audience in that crowd, for example. When you look at in the audience, it was a lot of like older people that most likely maybe aren't into getting their news from YouTube or from like online. They might just get it from like CNBC and like hear Gordon Johnson talk. And so like I just feel like Elon could do a little bit better when it comes to just like wanting to like be excited about his company as well as far as the stock goes when people ask him that. Not saying that because I'm a long-term investor, I don't want him to pump it because I want to, make short-term gains. It's more of just like I feel like even in the news it just won't be covered as well because he himself doesn't like express exactly every great thing that Tesla does. So yeah.
Well, in a sense, though, there's like too much to like when I said, I mean, the really simple answer to the question is the PE. Like I said, the really simple answer to the question is the PE ratio of Tesla today is higher than the PE ratio of the other car companies because Tesla's growing and they're shrinking. But the real reason to invest in so Elon believes the real reason to invest in Tesla is Robotaxi and Bot. He sees those as the real big nuts. And in my models, they are in my napkin math models. They are. The battery revenue model is already crazy in terms of where it takes you. That's the $3,000 is sort of like the base case for the battery revenue model. But if you add in, you know, Robotaxi, the Robotaxi model just gets crazy. But let me bring up uh, Tesla talk, and then immigrant mentality will be next. So Tesla talk. Did you have something you wanted to say about the napkin math models?
Yeah, hey Warren. So I'm just pricing out the mega pack on the website here. If my math is correct, it's coming out to around $512 kilowatt hour currently. Is that what you have?
So it depends on how you do it. If you do one unit, it's $2.4 million for a 3.9 megawatt hour pack. If you do 10 units, it might be like, 1.6 million a piece. So I ballparked it at $500 a kilowatt hour. It's around 512, yes.
Sure. So I kind of just want to walk through a theory I have. Basically, Tesla's kind of priced their products to the incumbent. So with the ICE industry, Tesla can't underprice a Model 3 or else suddenly Model 3s will get bought up by the whole market, and hence why Tesla in lockstep has raised their prices with other suppliers. Other producers of cars. Um, because again, you can't have that arbitrage for the market where people can buy a Model 3 and it'll be cheaper to run than a Toyota. It just doesn't make sense. So I think what we have to do with Megapack or how to like kind of think about it is distill, like in the tweet, it says that the current production is enough to replace 50 fossil fuel peaker plants a year. I think just from a business case perspective, if a mega pack is cheaper on a kilowatt hour equivalent to a peaker plant, that would kind of be your floor in terms of how much they can ramp up. And then you kind of want to establish, well, how many kilowatt hours a year do peaker plants do? And from there, you can kind of distill what the floor is for a kilowatt hour because, a utility or government, they're not, opposed to saving a lot of money if it makes sense. Just like in Australia, with the the facility that they built there, they got a payback period within 1 or 2 years. So that'll kind of set the floor in terms of kilowatt hour pricing from here out to 2030. What do you think about that?
So first of all, I think I like your thinking. I never thought about it that way, and I always love when somebody comes up with something that's like, well, I never really thought about it that way. My initial reaction is that peaker plants are a relatively small share of energy production. They're a critical share because they fill in gaps when there's a hole. But I think that peaker plants are going to go away. And then the real story is going to be you're generating electricity, large amounts of electricity from solar farms, from solar roofs or whatever, and from wind generation. And mega packs are going to replace, or they're along with solar and wind, they're going to replace regular power generation. So I think that may actually cut against the $500 a kilowatt hour because those are probably less expensive per kilowatt hour, but I'm not sure. So I haven't thought about that idea enough to come up with an analysis. I would just say, right now, it's $500 a kilowatt hour, and um, I don't, the demand is off the charts, and the because, like you said, the return on investment is like 1 or 2 years. It's worth it. And even if competition comes along, and I think Megapack is probably the one that's most vulnerable to competition from other providers because, it doesn't rely on artificial intelligence or the software. I think there's some genuine value in Tesla software, but um, LG Chem can probably make a competitor Megapack. CATL can probably make a competitor Megapack. So that's where the most pricing pressure would be, except for one thing. The demand is so high that there's room for others. And then the other thing to keep in mind is with Tesla Energy, if you only look at, say, Megapack or Powerwall in isolation, you're getting one story. But if you think, well, maybe Tesla's going to sell all their Megapacks with solar or all their Powerwalls with solar. Currently, they only sell Powerwall with solar. Um, if if the Tesla Energy story is not just Megapack, but Megapack, Powerwall, and solar, then I think that brings the $500 a kilowatt out, the revenue per kilowatt or well above $500. Sorry, that was a ramble. Did I get close to answering your question?
Yeah, I think you're kind of right with it. I think there's got to be somebody like maybe Matt Smith can understand, the analysis and what the current TAM is for power generation, and what that bottom of the barrel, kilowatt hour price is for the average global consumption or whatnot. But I just want to say, many years ago, Chamath said on CNBC that there's trillions upon trillions of dollars in power generation assets that are basically going to go upside down in value because the return on investment turns out to be, you know, terrible in the scope of a mega pack and a solar combination. So I don't know, just something to think about. I think there's a lot more people more knowledgeable in the space than I am, but just kind of, that's how I kind of think about it. So.
Yeah, Matt is actually a good person to bring up that he would be a good person to discuss that with. I just want to reset the room or just give people a restart because there's a lot of people in the room in the space who may not have been here before. I announced this space with a tweet, and I have been doing videos where I talk about my napkin math models for Tesla stock. And Tesla stock I see going to at least $3,000 a share by 2030. And I actually honestly genuinely think that's low, that the number is going to be much higher. But the simple model in the tweet, if you imagine Tesla doing 3 terawatt hours of products containing 3 terawatt hours of battery cells, making $500 in revenue per kilowatt hour of battery cell, which is lower than what Tesla currently makes on its products, you end up with $1.5 trillion in revenue. Tesla's revenue for 2022 will be about 80 billion. So that's a 20x in revenue in 10 years. And that doesn't include Robotaxi, and it doesn't include bot, and it doesn't include AI training as a service and other things that Tesla may come up with between now and 2030. And then the other model, and if you do 1.5 trillion in revenue and you figure, okay, uh, 30% gross profit, you get $300 billion in gross profit, and then let's say $200 billion in net profit, making up the numbers. And then you give it a 30 price earnings ratio, you're at $6 trillion market cap, which is roughly a 10x from where we are today. So that's not quite $3,000 a share. Um, and I think if you've tweaked the numbers a little bit, I think actually Yeah, I think the numbers are actually better than that. But the other model is Robotaxi model. Assume Tesla actually succeeds in getting Robotaxis to work, and it has their own 10 million vehicle Robotaxi fleet, which is something Elon said they would do at the Autonomy Day presentation in 2019. If each Robotaxi makes $50,000 a year in profit, you get $500 billion a year in gross profit. That's 350 billion dollars, say, in net profit. Give it a price earnings ratio, you see where it goes, and that doesn't include Tesla Energy, and that doesn't include bot, and that doesn't include AI training as a service, and you just get to these really big numbers really quick. And if you want to take that further and say, what if Tesla had a fleet of 100 million robo taxis? And there is plenty of room. People ask, what's the total addressable market for robo taxis? Well, there's 2 billion vehicles on the road. If each robotaxi replaces 5 vehicles, then 100 million robotaxis would only be replacing 500 million vehicles. And since they're lowering the cost of transportation, there's people are going to use more transportation once they lower the cost. But if 100 million robotaxis make $20,000 a year in gross profit, you get a $2 trillion gross profit. You get like a 1.3, $1.4 trillion net profit. 30 price earnings ratio. Now you're up into like the crazy $40 trillion market cap that people think I'm absolutely nuts. And it's, but it's hard to come up with an answer to that math. So, Christian, how nuts was what I just said?
Well, you know I love you, Warren, but you lose me a little bit when we start going into those big numbers. I'm not saying the math doesn't work out. I'm just saying you're right. It's just hard for me to imagine a company worth that much. But just to go to one of your other earlier points about the PE, they grew earnings 100%, literally Q3 to Q3, 21 to 22, and we're going into another record Q4. And that multiple is going to come down even more because now we're in the low 60s, and with another record quarter in Q4, say 430, 450,000 cars delivered, and maybe the energy does a little bit better, but again, still a small percent of the revenue, that multiple is going to shrink even more. And then as we look into 23, what is that earnings? And now we're just getting, forget all this. I love what you're talking about, but like just from a stock perspective and a valuation perspective, what Wall Street already knows about the business, you know, what's this company going to trade at when it's growing earnings so fast? It's going to be something ridiculous. So I don't know if Tesla talk. I know you're pretty good with this kind of stuff. I'd love to hear any conversation because Tesla, for other reasons than what we just know about the business, about macro, what Elon's doing with Twitter, it seems like it's being depressed for other reasons than business reasons. So, you know, where is this going into 23, and what kind of opportunities coming up?
And before Tesla Talk answers, I just want to say, the point of the space, and I'll indulge this for a minute, but the point of the space is to talk about 2030 rather than 2023. So, but I do enjoy the conversation about
I got you.
2023. So let's go ahead with it. Tesla Talk. Do you have a response? You have to unmute your microphone. I don't know if he's going to respond. So I'll take on 2023. So I think we're looking at an end of the year 2022 run rate of maybe 2 million vehicles a year. And then we're looking at, if we have 50% growth, then we're looking at an end of the year run rate in 2023 of 3 million vehicles. So you would say, well, then they're going to do 2.5 million vehicles in 2023, but because of the shape of the curve, you're probably talking about 2.2 or 2.3 million vehicles in 2023. So that's, an average of, more than 500,000 a quarter deliveries. Now, again, the delivery wave may shift things. You may see a little bit different, but you should be seeing really, really substantial revenue and profit from that. And then I believe that you're going to see Megapack ramping, Powerwall ramping, and you're going to see Tesla Energy start kicking in a more significant share of revenue. But vehicles are growing, so energy has to catch up. But sorry, Avatar, you had something you wanted to say? Go ahead. Please unmute yourself and speak. There's a microphone button in the lower left corner of the screen that you have to tap to unmute yourself so you can speak. Avatar. Okay, not hearing anything. I'm going to go ahead. Christian, let's go with your shock at my 100 million. Is it the 100 million, the 10 million Robotaxi version that scares you, or the 100 million Robotaxi version that freaks you out more? Oh, go
Yeah,
Avatar, go ahead. Let me let Avatar go ahead. Avatar, speak, please. No? I saw your microphone flicker. If you want to speak, you gotta unmute your microphone. All right. Okay, Christian. So which one bother? I'm guessing the 100 million Robotaxi version bothers you more?
Well, here's the thing. It's not so much your numbers, Warren. I think your numbers are fine. Just for me, and again, this is just a very nice back and forth. It's just hard for me to like when I judge a business, when we talk about robo taxis, if I don't know it's for sure to happen, I put a value on it. Here's the way I think about it, and maybe I know you disagree, but I'll just throw this out to the room. When I value robotaxi, I can't value when I say there's X amount of robotaxis, how much are they going to make each robotaxi, multiply it out. I get all that, and I think that's great, and you've done a great service for that. What I like to do is, since we don't know for sure if robotaxi will hit in exactly the way we think it might, I look at it, what is the value of a car that could drive itself just in its basic form right now? What is the value to the consumer? What is the value if it maybe takes a long time, but maybe in the next few years, a place like your state, Florida, does a little trial program in an area where they think robotaxis will do well, and it becomes a model for the rest of the country, and it slowly spreads out over time in maybe not in a lower form where the value isn't all wrapped up in like initially, right? Well, now everything's a robo taxi, and here we are, and now we're just building cars, and we just multiply this out, and we get our valuation. It's more of a stop and a go, two steps up, one step back. So I would give it value today. I probably would give it maybe 100 billion or 200 billion in market cap just for the technology. It's just hard for me to wrap myself to value it in a valuation model by just taking number of robo taxis, how much is each robo taxi is going to, and then just make that multiplication. It's harder for me to wrap my head around that. That's just a general statement by me. It's nothing against your model. It's just not something I can get to.
Okay, so let me just address that quick, and then I'm going to let Junior speak, or ask Junior what his thoughts are. So, um, the robotaxi model that I'm using assumes that basically at first the robotaxis replace Ubers and Lyfts and taxis. That we have an existing market of uh, ride sharing and taxis or whatever that pick people up and take them places. And currently they charge ballpark 250 to $3 a mile, at least in the United States and Western Europe. I think it's probably a little bit less in China and certainly less in some other places. But the bulk of that travel, if the Tesla robotaxi replaces Uber and Lyft, and that's all it does, and they charge, let's say, $1 a mile, which I think I'm massively underestimating what the revenue will be. But let's say it's $1 a mile and they drive 100,000 miles a year, 60,000 of those miles are occupied. You generate $60,000 in revenue. The cost of operating the vehicle is going to get down with the next generation vehicle to around 10 cents a mile. 10 cents a mile times 100,000 miles, right? Because you're paying for the miles that you're not getting paid for. You have cost for the miles that you're not getting paid for. So you get $10,000 in cost and $60,000 in revenue, you get $50,000 in profit. Now, the practical reality is I've talked to Uber drivers who are making over $100,000 a year. Now, I don't think that's typical, but I think an Uber driver can make over $100,000 a year, and they can't drive 16-hour days. The robotaxi can drive 16-hour days. So I think there's potential for it to be much higher than that. But that's the short-term model is we're just replacing Uber and Lyft and taxis with robo-taxis, which are going to undercut on price and ultimately grow that market simply because all of a sudden the ride's cheaper. So somebody who might have chosen a different form of transportation chooses a robo-taxi because it's cheaper and more convenient. You go to the next level and say, at some point, the price of a ride falls below 70 cents a mile. That's why I'm dropping the gross profit per vehicle down to $20,000 instead of $50,000. Once the price per a ride drops below, say, 70 or 60 cents a mile, it starts to make sense for people who own cars for themselves to say, I'm not going to bother owning a car anymore because the cost of the typical American and I think European to own a car is around 70 cents a mile. It starts to make sense to say, I'm not going to bother owning a car anymore. I'm just going to make myself a robo taxi rider. And when I need a ride, I'll just summon a ride. and it ends up being more convenient in a lot of ways. People think, no, I need my car. Think about how many hours a year do you spend buying a car, selling a car, getting new tires, getting wiper blades, charging the vehicle, or gassing up the vehicle, or replacing a muffler, uh, getting insurance, and getting licensed and getting registered, all the different things you have to do in order to make vehicle ownership work is all gone. And then when you have to find a parking spot, a Robotaxi drops you off up front. So just to address that point, Christian, the simplest version is we're just replacing Ubers and Lyfts and taxis. And then the 100 million version is large numbers of people start deciding, the people for whom it is more expensive to own a car for a variety of reasons. They have poor credit, they have DUI convictions, they whatever. A lot of people just decide, wait a minute, I'm going to stop owning a car. And that expands the market to 100 million robo taxis. But I've rambled too long, and I want to give Junior a chance to speak. He's been waiting a while. Junior, did you have something you wanted to say?
Hey, what's going on, William? What's going on, Kristen? Just wanted to, I heard you talking about runway of 2022. Tesla's gonna do 2 million cars. You said?
Elon has said in the Ron Barron interview, Elon said that they're targeting and they're trying to get to 40,000 vehicles a week by the end of 2022. 40,000 times 50 is 2 million. And it's really, since there's 52 weeks in a year, it would really be over 2 million. And really, Elon is probably being over optimistic, so we're probably not going to reach 40,000 a week. But there's at least a credible shot. And, he said it at the Q3 earnings call. And I think at least one of the other people on the call was in agreement that that's the target that they're shooting for. Whether they get there or not is another question. But the idea is they should get to a 2 million vehicle run rate by the end of the year. So
So,
what were you asking about that?
so what I remember Elon saying on the earning call, he said something about cars that are going to be produced in the fourth quarter are going to be spilled over in January. So I don't see them doing. Before I continue, I am a Tesla investor. So yeah, I don't see them doing 2 million. They'll do like 1.4. But he did say the cars are going to spill over into January. So maybe that 40,000 cars a week or whatever is going to be spilled over to the first quarter. Then it'll probably start then. But they're not going to do 2 million this year. There's no way they'll do that.
No,
They
no,
have
no,
to.
no,
No,
no, no.
Junior, he's talking about 23. Go ahead, Warren.
2 million is the run rate. If we're making 40,000, if we're making 40,000 vehicles a week, then our annual run rate at this moment is 2 million vehicles a year. Not that we're going to have 2 million vehicles in 2022, but we're on a pace for 2 million vehicles a year at this one moment. At the end of 2023, I think they're going to be at a 3 million a year vehicle run rate. That's, a 50% growth on the 2 million a year run rate. And then so the production, and we're talking production, not deliveries, the production for 2023 would be somewhere between the 2 million run rate at the beginning of the year and the 3 million run rate at the end of the year. Probably not halfway, because the shape of the curve is, I don't know if you call that convex or it's concave up. I'm going to call it concave up, but that's probably the wrong way of saying it.
So you're saying that by the end of 2023, what I'm hearing, I believe, is that end of 2023 they'll have at least 2 million cars produced, right?
I think we're looking at 2.2 or 2.3 million cars produced for
Okay, I
2023.
just got it confused because that makes
Yeah.
sense because it sounded like you were saying that this year would be 2 million, the next year of the end of 2023 would be 3 million. That's why I was
No, and the other thing is, when you talk about vehicles being shifted over, what happens is, because they're producing at ever higher rates, because the production is growing, the last week of the year you can't deliver those cars, and that was your most productive week of the year, right? So you're always going to if it continues the way it's going, you're always going to underdeliver compared to production, because your production is highest in the last week of the year, and you couldn't deliver those cars. So to some extent, we may end up be perpetually under delivering. I kind of wonder whether you have a buildup of vehicles you didn't deliver last year that you deliver at the beginning of the year, and does that offset that, last week or two of the year where you couldn't deliver your highest production rate? But because it used to be that Tesla would swing back and forth to underproduce, delivering more than they produced or delivering less than they produced, and it may be sort of a perpetual thing now where they deliver less than they produce just because production is growing so fast. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
okay.
I think Yeah, I think you're in my zone, Warren, for 2023, that 2.2 to 2.3 million production deliveries. I think that is kind of, it could be higher, but I think that is the right zone, and I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah. That sounds right.
All right, Stephen, what did you
Hi,
want to
good
say?
afternoon or evening. Um, just from my experience, thinking about 10 years from now, it's just very hard for me to think that far ahead. And examples that I like to give is that I worked in telecommunications in 96 when Al Gore created the internet. And we had no clue that trillion-dollar companies were going to be created. And it happened. And, I think what you're saying, Warren, is just hard to fathom that this is going to happen. And I certainly think it will happen. Our stock, I'm in telecom, was at $50 in 2000. It crashed down to like, I don't know, 20. And it's still at 20 today, 22 years later. So a lot's going to happen between now and 2030.
Yeah, let me just address the long-term issue is, look, my napkin math models aren't perfect. They're oversimplified. There's a lot of different things that people could raise with them. But if you're looking at the future and say, well, people are going to need to get from point A to point B, and it seems obvious to me, it seems obvious that at some point, and like I'm very optimistic, and I think it might be by the end of 2023 that we see a Tesla robotaxi deployed somewhere, maybe Chandler, Arizona, or San Francisco, where there are existing robotaxi trials for Waymo and Cruise. Um, but maybe it's 2024. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to gauge the pace of progress and where the point is where it reaches that floor that it's good enough. I don't know the answer to that question. I think they have a good sense that it will be by the end of 2023, that they have a list of these are the things we got to check off before we're there. Like it's got to make U-turns. It doesn't make U-turns yet, right? That's a really good example. It's going to have to be able to make U-turns. There's certain behaviors it's going to have to get better at, but I think with Dojo and with the improvements in the NVIDIA GPU cluster, with the increase in data generation, all the other things that they're doing, I think that the pace of improvement is actually increasing, and we just can't see that because it's hard for us to grasp it. But Stephen, go ahead.
Um, there was a comment made on one of these spaces that about FSD, that why wait until it's 100% perfect? Let it just ride around just like Waymo does. Make right-hand turns. Don't do the real hard stuff. Just let it drive around and do what it can do. And that way you can start introducing people to it.
So I think that misses the goal of FSD, which is to be a generalized solution to the problem rather than a handicap solution to the problem. And if you don't try to do the hard things, then it won't learn to do the hard things. Now, I actually think one of the innovations that I'm expecting them to implement, and this is like Warren's fantasy land, but I think this makes sense, is that they're going to improve maps and they're going to improve navigation. And at some point, they're going to grade intersections in terms of difficulty. And when they're planning the navigation, they're going to say, okay, this route is the quickest, but this route that's 30 seconds slower avoids that one intersection that's got a really high degree of difficulty. I do this on a daily basis. I used to do that. I don't live in this neighborhood anymore, but the neighborhood I'm staying in right now, I used to do this on a daily basis. There's this one intersection where the left turn is just really gnarly. And I would just go a different way. And it might cost me 30 seconds or a minute, but I don't want to make that left turn. It's like a really it's a really wide open intersection with a big median area. It's kind of like a Chuck Cook style left turn, but you have poor sight lines to the right, which is, you're trying to merge into traffic and they can be coming at 60 miles an hour. And then there's this Chuck doesn't have a road coming from the opposite side coming in. This does, and there's just so much volume sometimes that I just as a habit, I just don't make that left turn. I go another way. And I think at some point the nav decides, without saying we're not going to make left turns, we're just going to avoid difficult intersections. If it's going to save us 30 seconds or a minute to take the difficult intersection, let's spend the extra minute and go the safer route. So I think that's something that may happen rather than avoiding that. But Junior, go ahead.
Yeah. So when it comes to Robotaxi on the earning call, Elon was saying that it's going to be worldwide by the end of the year, and he said that he might get approval for next year, but he didn't say what level approval it will get. And before Elon builds Robotaxi, I think he's gonna build the compact car first, the $35,000 car, and I don't think the $35,000 car is gonna be the Robotaxi. They're gonna be two separate cars.
Okay, so first of all, what I heard Elon say was that FSD beta would go into wide release by the end of the year. And I think he believes that they're going to be. Did he say? Maybe he said he thought they'd be level. I don't. He
No,
tends not to.
he didn't.
He
He didn't say that. He just said that it's gonna be a worldwide the end of this year. He goes,
no, not
this is the month.
worldwide. Wide release. Wide
Yeah,
release
that's what I
means
mean. That's what I mean. Why release by the end of the year? And he said he might get approval, but he never said what level for next year. So
okay.
that's what.
So Elon tends not to talk in terms of levels, although if you push him on it, he will. Um, so I don't. For those who aren't familiar with that, the Society of Auto Engineers created a level system for self-driving cars, where the current ADAS systems are level 2, and there's this sort of level 3 that nobody cares about, and then level 4 is the car can drive itself, and you don't have to pay attention, but you do have to be in the driver's seat to take over when it tells you need to take over. And like it'll drive in most environments, but some environments it can't drive. And level 5 is it can drive anywhere. I personally think that most humans are not level 5. Like my daughters are not level 5.
But my point is that when Robotaxi does come out, he's gonna have it on the cars we have now and the compact car before he even makes the Robotaxi car. That's what I believe.
Yeah, no, my expectation is that FSD, that I'll be able to take my 2018 Model 3 and send it out to serve in the Robotaxi fleet. And, I'll press the Go Make Me Money button on my Tesla app and the car will go out and make me money. And that should be viable. Um, if not 2023, 2024, maybe. That's my optimistic scenario. But when we're talking about my napkin math models, it only has to happen by like 2026 or 2027, even later maybe, to get to a 10 million robotaxi fleet in 2030. The idea that people think I'm saying my robotaxi models based on Tesla delivering robotaxi next year, I'm talking about 2030. The
Yeah,
vehicles are still being produced.
yeah.
If
Did
Go
did
ahead.
did Elon? I don't remember Elon saying this, but did Elon ever say that when Taxi does come out that we'll be able to use our own cars? Did he actually say it with his own mouth?
Yes, Autonomy Day.
He
Autonomy
said
Day
that.
in 2019 he was talking specifically about the Tesla Model 3, that it would cost about 18 cents a mile to operate. That at that time he estimated that the cost of operating a Model 3 is about 18 cents a mile. He did kind of like a model like I'm describing about, here's the revenue and here's the cost and here's what they're going to make. And um so yeah, there's people who think that a robotaxi needs to have self-opening doors and self-closing doors so that if a rider doesn't close the door when they leave, that the vehicle isn't stuck. I think they're misunderstanding how effective software can be. Like if you leave your vehicle plugged in at a Tesla supercharger, you get charged $1 a minute and you get a notice you're being charged $1 a minute. If you leave a robotaxi door open and the robotaxi can't operate, you're going to get a notice on your phone, hey, shut the door, we're going to charge you $1 a minute. And people will come back and shut the door.
So let me ask you a
So
question. Let me ask you a question. Do
yeah.
you believe that the compact car that's $35,000 or whatever it's $30,000? Do you believe that car is gonna have a steering wheel or no steering wheel?
Um, so they've been very vague about it. They've been referring to it as the Robotaxi platform. Elon has said in the past that it would not have a steering wheel and pedals. I did speak with someone fairly high up within Tesla who told me that there will be a version with a steering wheel. He was speaking in particular for the Indian market, that this is the vehicle that will be able to penetrate the Indian market, because it will be relatively low cost. And I think he was saying a $25,000 vehicle. If I remember that conversation correctly, he was saying that this vehicle would end up being priced at $25,000. And I still don't think that's a low enough price to be successfully in the Indian market, because the Indian market, like more than $10,000, is very expensive for a vehicle. But they know what they're doing. And the guy I was speaking to is at least ancestrally from India. He may be from India himself. So they've definitely thought about getting into the Indian market, and so I think it may actually be a $25,000 vehicle. Um, but if you believe in the robotaxi story, let me just address this really quick. if you believe that robotaxi is going to happen and you're Tesla and you just built a vehicle and you can run the vehicle in your own fleet and make $50,000 a year from the vehicle for 10 years. So the vehicle is going to generate 50,000 years in profit. So the vehicle is going to generate $500,000 in profit for you if you just run it in your own robotaxi fleet. Or you can sell it to some guy for $25,000. Why would you sell the car to anyone for less than say $300,000, right? If you can make $500,000 in profit by just running the car in your own fleet, why on earth would you sell it to someone for anything less than like $300,000? Christian, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you on that completely. If you have that, and yeah, I don't see why you would sell it to a consumer unless they're willing to pay that crazy price and they're going to run a fleet. I agree with you. I think it becomes silly for Tesla to give them away. They would just keep them and then just run them in their own service. So 100%. But I want to come to one point, and I don't know if you want to indulge me. It doesn't go to your 2030, but I think it's a good conversation. I've watched Autonomy Day, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times. I love that presentation. And during that presentation, Elon Musk talked about even in 2019, it being done in 2020, and he's reiterated these over the years. That's fine. But he spoke about in a jurisdiction, but we won't have regulation everywhere. In order for this to happen and to look out 7 years, it's got to start somewhere. So I think it's just a good little quick discussion. Is Elon in conversations? I know we don't know this, but I think it's good to just kind of go through the exercise. Where is Elon targeting for the first jurisdiction to run out these robotaxis as it's getting better? Is it a state like Florida? Does it have? Is it like, so you could speak to this? Where is Elon looking to start this? Is it a suburban area with, where I live? There's big roads. There's not a lot of traffic. You could kind of prove the concept out. You can kind of get the app up and going and smoothing out any bugs. It has to start. It's like the universe, right? It started with a speck and it exploded out. Where does it start? What jurisdiction will allow Elon
Sure.
Musk to start the robotaxi? I think that's
So,
important.
so I think the simplest answer is there are currently robotaxi fleets operating in Chandler, Arizona, which is near Phoenix, for those who aren't familiar with it. There's a Waymo fleet operating there. There are Waymo vehicles and cruise vehicles operating in San Francisco. I think there's one or two other cities that are testing out robotaxi fleets now in the US. There are cities in China that are allowing robotaxis to be tested, so we shouldn't rule out China as a possible test bed. So my gut hunch would be there's an existing path to running a robotaxi fleet in these cities. So it would make sense to say, all right, what did they have to do to get approval for their robotaxi fleet in that city? Okay, let's put ours through that same process and see if we can get approval. So that's one answer. The other answer is, and this is a key detail, and you mentioned Florida, and I'm glad you did. Florida adopted a law, I think it was passed in 2019, that self-driving cars are legal and robotaxi networks are legal. This is very forward-thinking for Florida. For people who think that Ron DeSantis is a dinosaur, Ron DeSantis signed this bill and was very positive about it. They're thinking ahead. The Miami mayor, the Fort Lauderdale mayor, these guys are not necessarily partisan. The Fort Lauderdale mayor is a progressive Democrat, but he's like excited about boring company system in his city. Um, Florida is very forward thinking. So self-driving cars are legal, robo-taxi networks are legal, and local governments are prohibited from regulating them or taxing them. So once you demonstrate a working system in, say, San Francisco or Chandler or whatever, then they're going to come to Florida and say, hey, we got to run this here. And I don't think Florida even has a regulatory structure set up for it. It's just Tesla would come in and say, hey, we're ready to go. And I don't know that they need to get approval from an agency. I think it's already legal and they just run it when they're comfortable that it's ready. And I think there are at least a few other states that have adopted a similar law to Florida's. So then another example would be the Las Vegas would make a lot of sense because of the Las Vegas, Boring Las Vegas. The Boring Company has a tunnel system in Vegas that eventually we would expect them to be using self-driving cars in the tunnels. And if they have a robo-taxi network running in Las Vegas, then it would be like, closed. It would be end to end. You come out of your house, the car takes you, it drives through the Boring Company system if necessary. If not, it doesn't. And then it comes out of the tunnel at the other end and takes you to your destination. Um, so, and this is another key. I want to mention this. Orlando and Las Vegas are the two largest convention center cities in the United States. and lots of people travel to those two cities for tourism and other reasons. But in particular, a lot of government agencies go to conferences in those two cities. And a lot of bureaucrats and politicians, low-level politicians at least, will experience boring company tunnel systems and self-driving cars and robotaxi networks in these cities. And they're going to get home. And I'm not saying they're going to get home and say, oh, we should do this for our citizens. They're going to say, I want this for myself. So I think getting getting robotaxi systems up and running in places that attract a lot of tourists and in particular a lot of local government officials. Once they see it, they don't want their daughter riding in it with an Uber driver. They're gonna want their daughter riding with a robotaxi. When they're trying to get to work, if I don't have to own this crappy car anymore and I can just ride in robo-taxis and save money and be more convenient, then you could see some local government officials saying, "Hey, I want that." And that's what I think is going to drive the spread is once it works somewhere, just like how Uber and Lyft spread. Uber and Lyft started in certain locations and then they spread. And they spread because other people saw that and said, "Hey, I want that here." So once it happens somewhere, it's going to spread. So Stephen, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're kind of answering my questions, but it's kind of along the lines of what is it going to take for full self-driving slash robotaxi to move the stock forward? What has to happen in your?
So there's two things that would happen that would cause it to move the stock. Number one, I think the first thing is if they actually deliver let's say they get to so-called level 4 or what Elon described as you have to sit in the driver's seat, but you don't have to pay attention unless the car tells you to. All of a sudden, you can now let your car drive and you can be busy on your phone or you can be kissing your girlfriend or whatever it is. You read a book in the car while the car's driving you where you want to go, right? That increases the utility of the car and that increases the take rate being the percentage of people who are buying a Tesla who add FSD. If the take rate goes up, that's going to increase revenue. That's going to increase profit because the revenue from FSD is basically all profit. So if the take rate goes up, that would drive the stock up. And then the next level is when the Robotaxi network goes live, that drives the stock up. But I just think, plain and simple, if they nail it to the point where you don't have to pay attention anymore, and all of a sudden see people say, "Holy crap, this is amazing. I want that." The take rate goes up, the value goes up.
So correct me if I'm wrong. When you said where would they start full self driving, I've heard that San Francisco, California is where most of the FSD team people do all the work, and that's why over there has the best results in FSD. So if that's the case, would you think they'll start it there first?
I think that's a good reason to start there. The other good reason is because there are existing pilot programs for robotaxis, so there's a path to go to the city of San Francisco, I'm guessing it is, and get approval for operating a robotaxi fleet just the same way that Waymo and Cruise did. And I also think Chandler, Arizona, it is true. Elon has said that because there's so many FSD cars and FSD engineers in the Bay Area, not that it outperforms in that area and may perform worse in other areas. I think he said they overfit to the Bay Area. That'll change over time. But that is a reason why the Bay Area might be a good place for it. Yes.
And my second thing to what Stephen asked you about what will move the stock market on FSD, I think once they get the approval of level 5, that will guarantee a stock movement for sure because at least they know they have it working.
Yeah, I don't know that there's some government agency that says ding, you're level 5. I think that's like a common misconception. It's like the vehicles that are operating in Chandler, Arizona and San Francisco don't have federal approval. There's a local program. I don't know if it's a California DMV program or if it's a city of San Francisco program. There's a local or state level program that authorized these vehicles to operate there. And I don't think they necessarily classify them as level 4 or level 5. They just said, okay, you can run your robotaxi fleet here. The level system is something that the Society of Automotive Engineers created, and I would argue that's out of date. Because here's the simple question: does it drive better than human? And somebody raised this point earlier about, well, European roads are more difficult. Look, it either drives better than human or it doesn't. Once it drives better than human, right? Once the latency goes, and there's things we're waiting for, the latency to go down, the jitter to go down, if you get into all the technical stuff of what's going on, It's able to do U-turns. It's able to do other things. Its lane change behavior gets better. At a certain point, it becomes, I will at least say, safer than human. I don't know if it's safer than human yet. It's definitely safer than human with supervision.
So
There's
this so this is what I think. This is what I think. I think that it's gonna be, so you're right. No one really knows what the government's levels are and how they get there. So maybe right now, so beta, how much miles do they have, or kilometers in beta data do they have already for FSD? Do you know?
something like 60 million miles.
Okay, so do you not think they need another 60 million miles to get to that, like unprotected, like not hurting nothing, no takeovers, nothing like that? Then that will be FSD fully.
So I don't think there has to be no takeovers, but um, what's going to happen is there's no question it's not ready yet. Okay, we can agree on that. The fleet is growing. The amount of data that's being generated is growing. So the 60 million miles that we've seen is going to come a lot faster next time because there's more vehicles. And as it gets better, like I turn it off a lot because it's annoying when it doesn't work right, or there's spots where I know it doesn't work that well, or I'm in a hurry and I want to get somewhere and I know it's not going to get me there quicker. It's not going to make that light, or it's not going to get, it's not going to make the lane change quick enough to get around that car. So I take over a lot. As it gets better and better and better, you're going to see people who have it use it more. Like my daughter has my Model 3 and she never uses FSD beta because she likes driving the car, which is understandable. Um,
So
so
yeah,
you're going to see the miles increase when it gets better, more people will use it, more people use it more. And then I think there's going to come a point where Tesla decides we think we're ready. And then they're going to communicate with whichever regulators are relevant. Maybe it's the city of San Francisco or the California DMV or the Chandler, Arizona, whoever. They're going to communicate with whichever regulators are relevant and say, we think we're ready. We've studied what you did to approve these guys for their fleets. We think we've met the standards that you set for them when you approved their fleets. Please let us operate, and let us know what other data you want. And that'll be the first step.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Warren, I agree with you, but I think some of it, and I'm going to go into the political sphere here. Some of it could be a little bit political. We keep thinking San Francisco, yeah, the engineers are out there, works great out there, but what if, just like the German factory took a while to get out and there was a lot of red tape, maybe Elon positions himself to be, we got our headquarters in Texas now, in Austin. Why maybe not set up there, or a Florida where he's more friendly with DeSantis? Maybe a government that's more open to Elon and Tesla, and maybe they want to be the first to go in on Elon with this. So I don't know. I'll just put that out there. I know California seems obvious, but politics, as much as don't as well, maybe we do think, but as much as we think it works well out there, politics always comes in, right? And Elon kind of broke with California, put his eggs in basket with Texas. Not that California wouldn't do it if they see the data. I'm not against it. I'm not. But what I'm saying is, I believe that there will be politics involved with this, even if the data is overwhelming. And I believe Elon is positioning himself either in Texas or Florida to maybe make a move if California tries to hold it up with massive red tape and massive regulation and massive headaches. So I'll just point that out there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a chance of that. At the same time, I would say if you go to the Bay Area, there's a lot of Teslas. And if Elon wants to say, I want all these Tesla owners to be able to have their cars be self-driving, and the local government says no, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of Tesla people who are going to be angry, and they're not going to be angry at Elon over that one. So there's a lot of Teslas here in Florida, but California, I think, has like 5 times as many per capita as here, and it's growing. And by the way, yes, they moved the headquarters to Texas, but Tesla's employment numbers in California have grown, not shrank. Fremont's getting bigger. Fremont has been hiring. Palo Alto's been hiring. They're they 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 shifted the headquarters, but they still employ a lot of people in Fremont, and SpaceX still employs a lot of people in Hawthorne. So I'm sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
A question for Christian. You think maybe Elon should step down as CEO and just be the techno king so that we don't have all these issues, political, whatever?
Oh, I don't want to go there. Let's not do that. We're talking about
No?
napkin math
Okay, I
models
was
for.
going to go there, Warren. Hey, this space is live. You got to
All
liven
right,
it
all right,
up,
all
Warren.
right. Go ahead, go ahead. What do you think?
I'll be nice. No, I mean it is the question du jour right now. I mean, there's a lot going on, Warren, so it's okay to talk about it. Um, what I would say is no. I believe Elon, and you actually put the poll question up, Warren. Elon
Yeah, but
should
not for
remain
the
the
space.
same.
Not for
I
the
know it was a
space.
joke, but still. Well, I'll just say it real fast. Elon should be the CEO of Tesla. This is Elon. I've been tweeting about this a lot. This when you buy Tesla stock, you're buying Elon Musk. You're going in partnership with Elon Musk. You're going into business with Elon Musk for good and for bad. And what I see in the Tesla community, just my opinion, that they want the upside of Tesla, they want the upside of the EV revolution, they want the upside of autonomy, they want the upside of Tesla bot, but they cannot stand the downside of the genius making it happen, Elon Musk. So it's a package deal. You get the good with the bad. And I'll just say, no, he shouldn't be removed because if you remove Elon, he is the force of the innovation. He is the leader of why bots even in practice, he is the leader of autonomy. It doesn't mean that his teams aren't driving the force, but he's making sure the teams are doing what they need to do. And if you don't have a leader like Elon, a lot of this stuff, not only does it not happen, it doesn't even start. So of course he should remain the CEO. And I'll just leave it at that. But I think it is an important question.
All right, Fables, go ahead.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add about the Robotaxi thing is in America, like I was the one earlier that said about FSD being a lot easier to train in America because you've got bigger, wider roads. Um, Assume it's ready in 2024, 25. How far out is Europe and the rest of the world? Because it is easier to train it in America because of those reasons. And one other thing is at the moment it's about what $15,000 for FSD. In
Correct.
the UK, it's £6,000 because there's literally no progress on it at all. It's basically autopilot. Um, so my worry is, are they starting on scratch in say a right-hand drive market that has completely different um, like road rules? I don't know if you've ever heard of something called a magic roundabout in England. If you Google image that, that will probably shock most Americans. I'd love to see FSD go around that.
Right, right. But, this comes down to Fables. This comes down to this question. The goal isn't to make it, it's to create a general purpose autonomous driving vehicle that's safer than human. That, we are limited to two cameras, our eyes, that point in one direction. Um, some people drive with only one eye. That's legal to drive with only one eye. We get distracted by, conversation in the car, the girl in the bikini on the side of the road, whatever. Um, the car has eight cameras. It sees 360 degrees, constantly. It has a high frame rate. It's getting better and better at all those features. It doesn't get distracted by, at least I don't think it gets distracted by, it doesn't get distracted by the conversation in the car. It doesn't get distracted by other things. It doesn't suffer medication errors. It doesn't fall asleep at the wheel. All the things that it doesn't drink and drive and all that. So all of the things that make humans not particularly safe, the goal is to get it safer than human. And the idea that, well, our roads are too difficult for that. Well, look, if humans can drive it, then a vehicle with more cameras and faster compute will be ultimately able to drive that too. And
It's not that.
I think the idea
Sorry.
that there's some sort, because I hear this about India and I hear this about Cleveland or whatever. I'm making up Cleveland. I just made that one up. I hear this all the time about all these. Well, our roads are particularly difficult. If humans are driving your roads and it's safer than human, then why wouldn't it be able to drive your roads?
So my argument isn't they're not able to. It's that in your revenue model, you're assuming 10 million robo taxis a year. In my eyes, that would only have to be in North America because the other continents would be years away. So do you
But
expect them to make 10
but
million
why?
in just
But why is it that you think? First of all, the training is
because
getting faster and faster and
the
faster.
fact is our roads are harder to learn. They just are harder. So
Well,
and there's
how long
there's
does it
less
take
data.
someone to get a wait? How long does it take? At what age does someone allowed to drive a car in England?
You can pass your provisional at 17, and then you can drive at 18 with no one else in the car.
Well, does it take them longer to learn to drive in England than it takes an American kid to learn to drive?
Probably, but it is. If you look at just the roads anywhere, they are harder to learn. It's
Have you driven in Manhattan or Boston?
yeah, and I haven't driven there, but I can guarantee you London is 10 times harder.
Have you watched
And there's just less data in these markets, is what I'm saying. It's
I'm not a
even if they
Kim
were on.
I'm not currently a Kim Paquette fan, but if you watched her videos of driving in these old, because we have European style cities in the northeastern United States. You know, Boston is kind of a mess. Have you driven? Seriously, have you driven in Boston? Have you driven in Manhattan? Have you driven in Brooklyn? I've driven in Brooklyn. I've driven in Manhattan. I haven't driven in Boston in a very long time. We have dirt roads. We have all kinds of environments that we put our cars through. And the answer to your question is there's Teslas driving those roads right now, and they're observing, they're making they're identifying objects and they're making predictions about what those objects are going to do. And, you know, they will train it and, you know, it might take an extra year or two, but
Yeah,
we're talking
that's
about
my
2030. I'm talking about 2030, or let's push it out to 2031 or 2032. It doesn't really matter. You know, if my napkin math model ends up being correct in 2032 and your stock is worth $10,000 a share in 2032, are you really going to cry that it didn't happen in 2030?
I see what this guy's talking about, Warren. So I understand what he's trying to say because I watch a lot of FSD on YouTube, and I see the hardest place in FSD is New York City, and it's still North America. So it depends where you're driving. It is more difficult, and I'm an FSD fan. I love watching FSD videos, and it is harder in New York than it is in like any other place in New York in America. So
Yeah,
he
Michael,
does have.
I think
I drove
if
my,
you're
hang on,
looking at FS if you're looking
go
at
ahead.
FSD through the lens of how difficult roads are, you're really dramatically underestimating the competency of AI and how quickly things can learn and how quickly neural nets can adapt
No,
to
I'm
new
not.
environments.
I'm not thinking like that. What I'm trying to say is that for it, okay, let's put it this way: for it to get to level 5, it's gonna have to learn every single road before even touch. Forget level 5. Once it passes the regulators, right? It has to be every road in North America, right? So it could be doing good in California, whatever the Bay, but if it's not doing good in New York, it's not gonna pass. It's good everywhere. So it's going to be difficult at some roads. Yeah, the processes are getting faster. Dojo's going to be up and running. It's going to be helping it. Yes, I believe that. But it's still going to take some time. So what he's trying to say, if they do go to England, I think they might have to start all over again. But with the new Dojo computer, it will be faster than it is now, but it's still going to take some time for it to work in England.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some color there that I recently drove my Model X Plaid with FSD beta in Brooklyn, and it did not do that well.
Yeah,
Brooklyn,
exactly.
Brooklyn is hard. Brooklyn was hard. Um, but at the same time, it did somewhat okay, and it did better in Brooklyn. This was a few weeks ago. It did better in Brooklyn a few weeks ago than it did in Florida 8 months ago. So, you know, I think the idea that people have this idea that the learning curve is going to be like 5 years, and I think Dojo is coming, and the NVIDIA GPU cluster is getting faster, and the team is learning how to train for difficult situations faster. So I think people are underestimating how quickly this will learn. But again, you know, if it takes till 2032 to get 100 million robotaxis making $20,000 a year in gross profit instead of 2030, and your stock goes to, you know, $40,000, you know, if this market cap goes to $40 trillion, do you really care whether it happens by 2030 or 2032? Sorry, let's see. Colin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, so when it comes to the FSD, I think a lot of people are missing when it comes to its ability just to be able to learn really fast because once you, like, for example, it's almost like if you know how to make coffee at your house and then you go to somebody else's house and you know how to make coffee, you just have to basically you see the coffee maker there, you get the ingredients, you know how to make it. It's almost the same thing. It's just a different environment, so it might take you a second. Another example, it's almost like you know where you drive locally normally, you know how to drive. So then, if I, for example, I live in Phoenix, so if I were to drive in New York, the odds of me actually getting in a car accident are extremely low because I already know how to drive for the most part. And sure, like I might drive slower because I don't know exactly where I'm going. But that's actually one thing that the car has over me, that they know where the roads are. It knows better than I would. So like I would actually want to drive full self driving even as it is right now, because I know it would drive better than me, even though like I would say like I'm a pretty decent driver. So I think, especially when it comes to the computers, we underestimate how quickly they learn compared to us. It's one of those things where it's like Moore's law. Every 2 years, it's supposed to get twice as fast. So it's hard for us humans to comprehend that, considering like we can't be twice as smart in 2 years as like a computer can. So yeah.
Junior, go ahead.
Yeah, so back to fully self-driving when it gets approved. Do you think Elon and Tesla will not make customers that have Tesla cars make their cars go out on the road to make money, or and that the driver will have to be in the car till they make the real robotaxis fleet first, and then they'll make other people's cars go out in the open on its own?
Kathy Wood Kathy Wood of ARK Invest has been a proponent of Tesla starting a rideshare service where people sit in their cars and have FSD Beta drive or FSD drive while they supervise, ultimately leading to a robotaxi network, where the people don't have to be the driver doesn't have to be in the car anymore. But Elon has kind of avoided addressing that. I think it just goes away from, the goal right now is get the car to the point where it drives well enough that you can let it drive unoccupied. No one's in the real goal is to get it to the point where you can tell your car, go to the grocery store, or go pick up my kid from the school. And the car goes and drives somewhere with nobody in it and gets there, and you just don't worry about it anymore. And once you're there, then the robotaxi network's ready to go and you don't need to have a human in the car. Now, will some regulators say we want you to have a safety driver in the car for the first 6 weeks or 6 months? Sure, I suppose that could happen, and Tesla will comply with that if that's what's required. But at some point, the robotaxi network goes genuinely live, and you can put your car in the fleet.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think like when they do get it working, people are gonna have to be in the car for at least a month, a year before they even start going with nobody in the car. I agree with you.
I don't want to predict that, but
No, yeah, but
Langdon
this
raised his hand.
oh,
Langdon, did you
sorry.
want to say
All right.
something?
Well, thanks, guys. It's a very interesting conversation here, and I had a few thoughts, and I've shared these in some other spaces in the past. Background: I primarily work in healthcare, although I have significant involvement in machine learning, artificial intelligence work here at a large academic health science center and university setting in Canada. While I don't work on autonomous vehicles, I do work in deep reinforcement learning. And I think there's a few practical points, and certainly it'd be interesting to hear if there are any machine learning researchers here right now. In terms of the net, what we're considering full self driving at the level of a human, I think it's very important to step back and look at a kind of metrics in terms of what we're looking for and how that and whether we're actually comparing things directly or indirectly. Certainly I've heard, Warren, you mentioned, 8 cameras versus 2 cameras, biological neural network, silicon neural network. We have to keep in mind that the human brain, the Tesla FSD computer doesn't match anywhere near the performance of the human brain. And two, the kind of the evolutionary capabilities that the human brain has in terms of planning, in terms of learning. If you can imagine the hundreds of terabytes of information that Tesla's gathering and processing now, as you mentioned, the human body, human being is able to learn how to drive more or less in 20 hours. Why is it requiring such immense investments in infrastructure? Why is the learning process, relatively speaking, so slow? If you look at the hundreds of hours that are required to train the neural networks that are being placed into our cars, I think it's very important to question why that's occurring. And I think there are a number of technological reasons for that. One, I don't think the architectures are in terms of, say the transformer-based neural networks, the multi-headed, hydra nets and so forth that Tesla has spoken about. I don't think we're there. Jan LeCun has published some, and he's the head, I think, head of AI, or he's quite up there in terms of the AI program at Meta. Has published some interesting research in the last couple of months talking about roads to general artificial intelligence, or sorry, general, yeah, and talking about different architecture in terms of perception. Based on what Tesla's presented and looking at other state-of-the-art, research that's public, such as comma AI, I don't think we're there yet. So I think there's a lot of steps that will be needed. So despite the massive amounts of information that the fleet is bringing in, and I think the fleet is a very important component here, if you just step back and ask again, why is this taking so long? Means that the technology isn't there yet. It will get there. There's no question in speaking to.
Let me just I don't know if you were done, but your mic cut out anyway. I would just say that what the way you're talking sounds to me like the way people talked about computers beating the best chess player or the best Go player. I mean, ultimately, I honestly feel more and more like this as I drive, that driving is a video game. And computers are very good at playing video games. And what I mean is, like, I'm driving down the road and I see an opening in the right lane and I make the right lane change to get through that opening, and then somebody makes a right lane change in front of me. And like, there's a lot of moment, or like you're at the grocery store and you're headed for the open lane, and then somebody gets to that lane before you. It's just like, I feel like so many aspects of life are starting to feel like a video game. And computers are really good at playing games. And if you recognize that it is, in a sense, a game, and I think they're making a lot of progress. But I would just ask you, is Langdon still up? I think he's gone. David, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah. He was asking why it takes so long. Humans have 16 years of training of their surroundings before they even start driving. So that's not a
Yeah.
fair. Go ahead.
I mean, we have millions of years or billions of years of evolutionary training as well.
Exactly.
But yeah, but it is true. It's taking a long time. And we don't fully understand the nature of the problem. But what I see is, Elon made these predictions before and he was wrong, and every year he's predicting it's going to be next year and he's wrong. And the one thing that I noticed that's different is, in the past, Elon would say what's going to be next year, and nobody else from the Tesla team would say it. But I'm noticing that Zach Kirkhorn's on board, that it's coming soon. And I think Drew's on board, and I think Ashok's on board, and I think Karpathy was really, really careful when he answered Lex's questions about this. But I think it's not that they know it's next year necessarily. It's that they feel like they have a much better understanding of what it's going to take to get there now. That the hell that they've gone through to try to get there has helped them see all the challenges that remain. And it's always possible there's going to be some new challenge that's going to come up. But I think they have so much data, they've seen so many things, that they really have a sense of, okay, what are our limitations? Where is it weak? What do we need to do to get there? And I think, did Karpathy use the term tractable? I think he used the term tractable, that the problem is tractable, which I think means he thinks they have a full understanding of what, not that they have the solution to the problem, but they have the full understanding of what the problem is they're trying to solve, and they're confident that they can solve it.
He said it's doable.
I think he actually used the word tractable. But anyway, doable is the same basic thing. I do want to take a second here and just bring it back to, the title of the room is Tesla $3,000 napkin math. The tweet that I introduced this space was models for Tesla achieving a share price of, say, $3,000 or a market cap of $10 trillion or whatever. And the idea is, number one, it's the battery revenue model, which is, I feel like, a super simple model to understand. I think the point of the napkin math models is they're super simple to understand. That Tesla has said we're going to produce 3 terawatt hours worth of products in 2030. And my own review of Tesla's product portfolio is that $500 a kilowatt hour is a conservative estimate of how much revenue they're going to generate on those terawatt hours. And that works out to 1.5 trillion a year. And roughly that works out to $6 to $10 trillion market cap, or a 10 to 15x of where Tesla is today. And then if you do the Robotaxi model, which led into this conversation we've been having, if Tesla has a fleet of its own 10 million Robotaxis making $50,000 a year in gross profit, it's $500 billion a year in gross profit for Tesla. Call it $350 billion a year in net profit. You give it a 30 price earnings ratio and you're at a $10 trillion market cap. And in both of those stories, you're not including, let's say with a battery revenue model, you're not including robo-taxis, bots, you're not including AI training as a service. And the robo-taxi model I just described, you're eliminating, you're not counting car sales, you're not counting Tesla energy. So I think these are very conservative scenarios that get Tesla to a $10 trillion market cap, or a 10 to 15x of where the stock is trading today. So let me invite Dale to speak. Oh, Stephen, go ahead while Dale's coming up. Stephen, what did you want to say?
I was just thinking, once we get Robotaxi, what do you think the growth will be each year? Is it like 20%, 50%? Like, how like the cars are growing?
Oh, the growth rate.
Yeah.
So the way I see it, and this is just my own take, is the initial robotaxi stage is replacing Uber and Lyft and taxis. So there's a certain number of Ubers and Lyfts and taxis worldwide, and robotaxis come in, and the robotaxis basically replace those vehicles. And because their price is lower, they grow that business to some extent, taking share away from, say, car rentals, and taking share away from, public transportation. And but it's basically replacing Uber and Lyft, right? So that's stage one. Stage two is the moment that at some point, roughly around 70 cents a mile price for the ride. Maybe it's 75 cents a mile, maybe it's 60 cents a mile, but somewhere in there, a significant portion of the population that currently owns cars decides, I don't want to bother owning a car anymore. I'm just going to ride robo taxis instead. The average American supposedly spends 70 cents a mile on their car. So if you were to deliver robo taxis for 80 cents a mile, a significant portion of Americans are spending $1 a mile. If you had poor credit, your cost of financing is higher, your cost of car insurance is higher. If you buy more expensive cars or whatever, there's a variety of reasons. Or if you drive fewer miles, then um, your cost of owning the car is spread over fewer miles, so that your cost per mile goes up. So there's a certain context where you start to see a significant portion of the population that owns cars shifting to, I'm not going to bother owning a car anymore. So it's not necessarily a smooth like 20% a year, 50% a year. It's like there's going to be this sort of phase change, if that's the right term, or step change, when it hits a certain price point that a large number of people start deciding, I'm not going to bother owning a car anymore. And that's when you get to the 100 million vehicle robo taxi fleet making $20,000 a year, $2 trillion in, sorry, what is that? $2 trillion a year in gross profit, 1.4 trillion dollars a year in net profit, and you just get to that $40 trillion market cap. Sorry, Dale, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I had a question for Christian. Is Christian here still? Yeah, he's still here. Um, Earlier you
No,
mentioned.
I think he left. I think
Oh,
he
did
had
he?
he moved off the stage. He was co-hosting, and he apparently opted out of co-hosting. So I don't think he can answer your. He may have to go somewhere.
Okay, I'll skip over that question. But I guess the other comment, just from a hardware perspective, I'm a hardware guy, and I'm currently using Google's TensorFlow with machine learning, and Uh, my feeling is I do understand the gentleman's point of view on how they might not be close, and I can understand why he feels that way. But the way I look at it is Tesla's approach. They're using a type of brute force optimization. They're basically taking every single incident that could happen on the road and they're optimizing for it in some very innovative ways. And they're so close now that I think it's inevitable. Is the side of probability leans that it's inevitable that they're going to have this sooner than rather than later is my opinion. But we'll
Cool. Yeah,
see.
I would say for perspective, and I have this perspective, not everyone does. I taught a teenager to drive. I sort of taught two teenagers to drive, but the mom taught the second one more than I did. But I've taught teenagers to drive. I watched them learn to drive. If you ever watch the Lex Friedman interview with Grimes, there's this great moment where she says having children is like watching consciousness emerge. And watching your children learn to drive is sort of like just another level in the emergence of consciousness. And I just remember that my older child is the one I taught to drive. Watching her, she didn't look far enough down the road, right? They when they first start to drive, they're just trying to stay between the lines, and they need to, like, did you see? And I would just constantly prompt, hey, do you see that bicycle down the road? Do you see this down the road? Get your kid to like look down the road. And like my younger kid, like my older kid lives in Brooklyn, so doesn't drive much. But my younger kid like drove me to dinner the other day, and I was like, wow, she got good. Like, when did that happen? So they learn, and I feel in a sense when I'm supervising FSD beta driving, I'm teaching a teenager to drive. And right now it's, 16 years old. And it's been 16 for a while, and it's taken a long time to get to 17. Um, and there's a lot of, things that, like identifying objects and processing and reading, like children learn to read road signs when they're 4, right? Or 2 or 5. The car still hasn't learned to read all the road signs yet. That's like something they haven't bothered to teach it yet. So at some point they're going to teach it to read. I think they just said that they added a lane marking module or something. They just added something to understand lane markings better. So there's a lot of different things that it has to learn. So
Yeah, yeah, you're
go
right.
ahead, Junior.
Yeah, so I wanted to say something, but before I get to it, you're right about the science thing because I have seen a couple of videos. I should not a couple. I've seen one that it could read no right on red, so it could do that already. So that's good though. So my question is, I have for you. You're saying that by 2030 or 2031, you're saying that there'll be 10 million robo taxis, if I'm correct. And I remember Elon talking in Berlin saying that, or I think it was Berlin when he had the grand opening, by 2030, there'll be 20 million Teslas selling a year. Do you believe that the 20 million that he mentioned, do you think that's including the robotaxis or that's just cars?
Okay, so the 10 million robotaxis that I described is only Tesla's own robotaxi fleet, which he described on Autonomy Day, that Tesla would have a fleet of maybe 10 million vehicles to supplement the privately owned vehicles that like I put my Model 3 out in the fleet, right? So that's just to supplement that. Um, so that's separate and apart from this 20 million. The 20 million vehicles a year is the production rate of vehicles in 2030. And my opinion is once you're making robotaxis and your robotaxi network works, I don't know why Tesla would sell cars to customers anymore. From a shareholder perspective, from a traffic safety perspective, I would say they shouldn't sell cars to people anymore. They should just run robotaxis, run their own robotaxi fleet or sell them to robotaxi fleet operators because they're every vehicle, like if I own a car and I don't drive it 16 hours a day as a robotaxi, then I'm not displacing as many internal combustion engine cars from the road as it could be if it ran as a robotaxi. Like if you look at two different goals, one is I want to make money, right? And Tesla makes more money if it runs the vehicles in a robotaxi fleet than it does if it sells the car. And two, I want to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy by getting these stinky gas cars off the road. So every vehicle that's run as a robotaxi drives, let's say, 12 hours a day instead of 2 hours a day, and it replaces 6 cars. Every vehicle that's privately owned that's only driven 2 hours a day is only replacing one car, one gas car. So for two reasons, I would expect that once the robotaxi network goes live somewhere, then every vehicle that's produced should be going into the robotaxi network full time rather than for a privately owned car. Now, Model S and X are luxury cars, so maybe they sell those. Roadster's a fun car, maybe they sell those to people. But every robotaxi they produce, like this new robotaxi platform, would presumably go into robotaxi use, and I would say Model 3s and Ys would go into robotaxi use, and Cybertrucks would potentially go into robotaxi use as well.
Yeah, I believe you. I said that to myself a couple months ago. I believe that when they start making the robotaxi vehicle, that they won't be selling that. They won't be. They'll be like just pushing them out like Ubers and stuff. But my question is, do you believe that by 2030, the 20 million cars that he's talking about, is that included the robotaxi?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I agree that
Yeah.
too.
The
Yeah.
rough path is, I think they're going to be making. I think they're going to make about 2.2, 2.3 million vehicles in 2023. I hate making these predictions because I'm always wrong, but the number of vehicles produced in 2023 will be about 2.2 or 2.3 million. In 2024, I think we're probably talking about 3.5 to 4 million vehicles. In 2025, we may get to 6 million vehicles. And at this point, you've got a million Cybertrucks a year, 2 million Model Ys a year, maybe a million Model 3s a year, and 3 million Robotaxi platform vehicles a year, and then assorted other vehicles. And once you go, like, it's hard to know once you get beyond 2026, let's say, and you're going out to like the 10 million vehicle number. Like, I think that Robotaxi platform vehicle, if they're going to do what I think they're going to do, it's just the market for that is so huge that at some point, like, all production just ends up being that platform. Almost all production ends up being that platform because 80% of trips are a person going from point A to point B without a whole lot of other drama. So 80% of vehicles on the road should be the most efficient robotaxi vehicle you can have, which ideally would be my single passenger pod car vehicle, but we don't need to get into that here.
Okay.
All right, so we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes ish. Um, I want to ask, does anybody have any pushback on the battery revenue model or questions about the battery revenue model where I say 3 terawatt hours, $500 a kilowatt hour, 1.5 trillion in revenue, so on and so forth. You get to $6 to $10 trillion market cap and a 10 to 15x of where the stock is today. Or the idea of 10 million robots. Let's taking a step forward and saying, let's imagine that the robotaxi network is working. Because we had a lot of questions about will it be ready, so on and so forth. Let's assume that the robotaxi network is working in 2030. And Tesla does have a fleet of 10 million vehicles in its robotaxi fleet. And then there's other vehicles out there. Does anybody have any pushback on the model that I've got there where you've got 10 million vehicles making $50,000 a year, $500 billion a year in gross profit? You end up with, a 10 or $20 trillion market cap on those numbers. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
No, I have no thought. I don't. I have no thoughts. Sorry, bro. Please.
If I'm being over optimistic, what numbers am I being over optimistic about? If they're producing even 10 million cars a year in 2030, they should be able to have 10 million robotaxis in their fleet by 2030.
So the way I think is that I know everybody thinks different because they're investors and they look at different things. But the way I do it, I just believe that I go by physical things, what Tesla's doing, right? Up to maybe like 3-4 years. But I don't go as far as 2030 because I know by then they're gonna be the best company in the world. So I don't care what the numbers are. They're just gonna be the best. That's the way I see it. So I don't get myself in that deep into the Tesla, even though I'm an investor. The way I invest, the way my mind works is just completely different. I just know that they're gonna be good and they're gonna be the number one company in the world, and we're all gonna be happy. That's all.
All right,
That's
cool. All right, let me let B speak. B just raised came up to the stage. Go ahead.
So my it's not really technically pushback, but it's just like uh fleshing it out a little bit more. So Kathy Wood famously talks about how with every consecutive doubling of production, you get a certain reduction in cost. And so when you're talking about batteries being produced at scale like that, and then projecting out into the future, do you have to take into account the overall world production of batteries and how that's going to decrease cost and how that could affect profit margins and things like that?
Okay, so that's a great question. Um, the decreasing cost of battery, we are seeing that we expect the battery cost of batteries to decrease, at least for Tesla and probably for others. Um, but that doesn't change the model. The the battery share of the cost of the car is not necessarily that high. But right now we're starting with rough base case. The least expensive Tesla in dollars per kilowatt hour car is $800 a kilowatt hour. So even if the price of the car drops to where it's $500 a kilowatt hour, we're still in my model. And there's the other scenario, which is the software increases the value of the cars and it really goes to $1,000. I mean, it's not crazy to say that the value of the cars goes to $1,000 a kilowatt hour or more. And I didn't even get into bot. If you think, let's say bot costs $25,000 with a 2.3 kilowatt hour pack, then bot is like $10,000 a kilowatt hour. And there could be 100 million bots, probably not by 2030. But I think I've addressed that. Did I address your question, B?
Yeah, kind of. I guess it's just impossible to know, I guess, because you can't predict how demand is going to increase based on the new products that are coming out, and how quickly they can be released. But I guess we're going to be battery constrained for quite a while going forward. So,
Well, we're not battery constrained at the moment. I do think there's a risk of being battery constrained at some point in the next few years, and that's a big challenge. The other issue that I just want to address one thing. One of the frequent things I see outside that I don't see inside the Tesla community, and I love that I don't see it inside the Tesla community, is people feel that at some point the competition is coming. And I just want to point to this one data point, which is the Polestar 3 was recently announced. It's $85,000 for a vehicle that has less range and less performance than a $65,000 Model Y. So it's $20,000 more than a Model Y with less range and less performance. So if the competition is coming, they're really taking their time. And whenever somebody says, I just want to address the competition is coming, even though nobody's brought it up. Whenever people say the competition is coming, I just point out that on December 21, 2015, SpaceX landed their first Falcon 9 orbital rocket booster. That was now just about 7 years ago. Where's the competition? No one else has even tried to propulsively. Rocket Lab is sort of getting close to recovering a booster usefully, right? Rocket Lab, they've tried twice to catch a booster falling from the sky with a helicopter. Very interesting effort, but it's not propulsively landing a rocket booster. It's not anything close to rapidly reusable. But at least Rocket Lab is sort of trying, but nobody else has really tried to land an orbital rocket booster yet, and certainly nobody's done it. So SpaceX is 7 years ahead. And as far as I'm concerned, Tesla is 7 years ahead or more as well. So, Stephen, before you go, Jamie had come up for the first time. Jamie, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was curious if you have anything in your model for. I know you're talking about competition is coming and all that, and I don't want to sound like Tesla Q here, but do you have anything like, let's say, in battery technology, like it went from it's going to lithium iron phosphate now, but what if there's another breakthrough, and what if Tesla isn't that company that had that breakthrough? Um, how would that affect your model?
I don't think that necessarily affects the model at all. Number one, I think I hear that all the time. In fact, somebody was emailing me today about some sort of lithium metal batteries. There's all these technologies out there. Here's the thing: lithium iron phosphate is already inexpensive and getting less expensive, and it's already delivers robotaxi capable vehicles because a robotaxi doesn't have to have 400 miles of range. A robotaxi with 200 miles of range is probably enough. So you have to A, come up with a technology that's better in some way. B, you have to figure out how to make it on a commercial scale. B, you have to manufacture it in massive quantities. There's a long, long road to get from we have a better battery to actually delivering it in volume. And then if Tesla saw that you had a promising, like Tesla's like the biggest the elephant in the room or whatever, that's the 800-pound gorilla. If somebody actually demonstrates a working technology that Tesla thinks they can use, they'll buy it. I mean, they bought Maxwell Technologies to help develop the 4680 cells and the dry battery electrode. Tesla's not, if you actually come up with a solution to a problem, Tesla will just buy it. Like, who else is going to be who's going to outbid Tesla for this latest battery tech? Apple's
Right.
not going
Yeah.
Apple doesn't make cars. So Apple, other than Apple and Microsoft, companies that don't make cars, the car companies aren't going to be able to outbid Tesla for the technology. So, Stephen, go ahead.
So on your auto growth, do you currently have 50% growth, and then maybe after 2020, 2025, you start to taper off so that you can get to that 10 million or whatever your number was?
Well, so the battery revenue model is just 3 terawatt hours by 2030, which is what Elon and Drew have specifically talked about. And I think there's at least one other person who's talked about the 3 terawatt hour target for 2030. And again, if you push any of these numbers to 2031, does anybody really care? The 10 million vehicles in the Robotaxi fleet is just a number that Elon said at Autonomy Day that they would eventually have 10 million vehicles in their own Robotaxi fleet. And it's very easy to get to 10 million robo-taxis if they're going to start producing 3 million a year in 2025 and then growing that. That's not going to be a challenge to build a 10 million vehicle robo-taxi fleet.
Oh yeah, if they double each year, they'll get there easily. But I'm just kind of
No, even
wondering.
if they just produce 3 million a year starting in 2025, they'll have 10 million by 2030.
Right.
All right, Warren, just wanted to say I'm gone, and thanks for the chat. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Junior.
No problem,
I
man.
just added Dr. Andreas Lang. Dr. Lang, please, what do you have to say? Your microphone is in the lower left corner. You have to
Yes,
unmute.
yes, I am. Your model is very elegant, and I'm a ball like you, so there we are on one line. My question is, without question, Tesla has a moat with this robotaxi, and nobody is even close. So they will have a monopoly. And I think the governments on the world will intervene somehow. So they have to share the market. So what will be the influence on your model?
I think that is probably the greatest threat, not only to Tesla and Tesla stock and Tesla shareholders, but it's actually the greatest threat to the transition to sustainable energy and to making the roads safer for people. And I'll give you an example of this, by the way. Many people are familiar with Uber and Lyft. I don't know how many people are familiar with that some cities resisted Uber and Lyft. I think Key West, Florida still does not allow Uber and Lyft to operate. Last time I checked, they were not legal there. It was demonstrated fairly early on in the existence of Uber and Lyft that they lower drunk driving, that they reduce drunk driving deaths. So Uber and Lyft are really, really important in making the roads safer. And yet governments, knowing that they make the roads safer, governments resisted, interfered, banned, whatever, overregulated Uber and Lyft, knowing that they save lives. So I definitely think that the greatest threat is that governments are going to be jealous of the power and they're going to try to intervene in some way. I don't know that they're going to have a good way to intervene. And the most obvious thing is they're going to find a way to tax it. Because one of the things that's going to happen is as the world shifts to electric vehicles, gasoline tax revenue, which is a big revenue source, at least in the United States, gasoline tax revenue goes away. And that's dangerous. And then as we go to self-driving cars, this is a really interesting thing that I'm just going to talk about briefly. The roads get much safer. Um, we no longer need traffic enforcement, so we no longer need police to patrol the roads. The courts get less busy because there's fewer car accident cases, there's no drunk driving cases, there's no driving with a suspended. The number one crime in I think most of the United States is driving with a suspended license. There's no drug trafficking cases because most drug trafficking cases start with they pulled somebody over for committing a traffic violation, but the cars don't commit traffic violations anymore. So there's a lot of changes in society that eliminate a lot of need for certain government jobs. And imagine, I know everyone's going to cry when they hear that the personal injury lawyers are going to lose their businesses. I know you're all very sad for the lawyers, and all the billboards might go away and the ads on TV might go away. I know everybody's upset about that. So there's a lot of changes that are going to come with a robo-taxi network. And I do think that governments will find a way to get in the way, and they will find a way to prevent Tesla from making the road safer, from making people safer, from reducing the cost of transportation. They will find a way to make it. And, they're losing revenue, so they're going to want to make the revenue up. But like I said, Florida prohibited local governments from taxing or regulating robotaxi networks. Hopefully, other states will adopt that. But yeah, I agree with you. That's the greatest threat. And is Jessica on the stage? Jessica, what did you want to say? Thank you for coming up.
Hi, hi everybody. I actually don't remember what I was going to say. Sorry, I switched over to stream and then back, and you guys were onto something else. My apologies. Hello.
All right. Well, you're still my favorite Starbase coverer. So,
I appreciate that, Warren. Thanks.
all right, everybody. Well, we've been going for almost 2 hours. I think it's a good time to end it, unless somebody has something they want to say about battery revenue model or robotaxi model or some other model of napkin math for 2030 or beyond. And I don't see anything, so I want to thank everybody for participating. Christian's gone, but I want to thank Christian in particular for co-hosting at one point. Oh, Colin, wait, Colin's got something. We'll give Colin a shot. And Cybermark. Oh, Cybermark. Colin, go ahead. Colin, you there? All right, not hearing Colin. Mark, what do you have to say?
Warren, I want to know what your model looks like for the new features that we're going to see when Cybertruck rolls out. Like, how many are we going to get? 6 or 7 new features, 7 or 8, 9 or 10? What kind of profit revenues will we see? What revenue streams will we see from subscriptions to those services? Where's your math on that?
Okay, good question. And I don't have a good answer. The models that I proposed, which are in the tweet that introduced this space, the models that I proposed are not really about the individual features of cars. There's the battery revenue model, which simply assumes that a Tesla product generates in the ballpark of $500 a kilowatt hour in revenue. I actually think Cybertruck might mess with that model because Cybertrucks are going to have larger battery packs, and I'm not sure what the pricing is going to be. But the feature set doesn't really impact that much. And then as far as the Robotaxi network, I went with a simple version of the Robotaxi network, which is just Robotaxis taking people from point A to point B. I believe in a future Robotaxi network, Cybertrucks are going to be the towing vehicles for the Robotaxi network. So contractors, instead of owning pickup trucks or vans and driving their pickup truck or van to the job site, they will have these really nice trailers that don't bother having drivetrains. And they will summon a Cybertruck when they need to get to the next job site. And so the trucks, instead of sitting there idle, doing nothing for most of the workday, the trucks are out moving different, towing boats or towing, contractor trailers or towing other things around. So I think Cybertruck ends up playing an important role in the future Robotaxi network. And that probably generates more dollars per mile than a simple Robotaxi pulling a person. But as a share of the overall traffic in the Robotaxi network, I think it's small enough that it doesn't matter a whole lot. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. Nice. Thanks. The important point I want to make, I guess, for you to consider, because I don't know that you've delved into this much at all, is that the last time we saw Tesla roll out a completely new model, it was the Model 3, and with it came, the camera suite and the system that provided the capability for FSD and improvements to Smart Summon and a plethora of other technological features that introduced basically 2 new levels of subscribing to Tesla's services, 3, 4 actually. When you consider whether or not you pay for a monthly subscription to the internet through your car, or FSD, or navigate on autopilot, whatever your level of subscription is. And I wonder if you have any creative thoughts on what the plethora of new features that Cybertruck might offer software-wise to users that might improve revenue streams for monthly subscriptions or other things like that.
Yeah, I think they've been really good about keeping the feature set secret. I mean, we know certain things like it's going to have a compressor, right? We know certain things like it's probably going to have power outlets so you can power 110 volt and 220 volt tools or something like that. Whether it's going to be able to afford Whether it's going to be able to ford a creek or ford a lake or something like that, I don't know. Um, so yeah, it's I would basically say it's over my head to see where that goes. I think it's a good question. I think, is there potential for some sort of software subscription going along with Cybertruck? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have any. I don't. I just like it doesn't really fit the models that I'm talking about. The models that I'm talking about are just sort of like dollars per kilowatt hour for the battery revenue model times the number of batteries that you produce, the products, battery containing products you produce, and then the simple robotaxi fleet. Um, I don't think I can answer that until we get like a reveal on what Cybertruck's going to have, and even then, I might not have an answer. So
Well, hey, thanks for delving into that and talking about the safety features. I lost a coworker and friend while I was in law school working highways. He was run over by a semi driver who wasn't paying attention. And these safety features, you're absolutely right, are going to change the world. They already have, and they will continue to do so to make it a safer place for all of us to live in. Thanks for bringing it up,
thank you,
Lauren.
Mark. Jessica, anything else?
I've just been thinking about. I've heard you talk about the Robotaxi model many times, and I kind of related to my own personal experience in that I right now I'm sitting out at Starbase waiting or filming testing, right? And it's long days, long hours, much like most people who are going about. And there are days where it's like not just drunk driving or distracted drivers, but just fatigue, simple fatigue, that has caused me to, drift into the oncoming traffic lanes. If I glance over to look at a cloud, all of a sudden, I'm just thinking about how much more safe, like back to all the safety, and how there are times that I myself have hired or paid for a Turo, or not, sorry, not a Turo, what's it called? Lyft. I've got tired brain. Sorry, everybody. A Lyft to come get me, to take me over to a friend's house, or to meet people out here in Brownsville or something, because I'm just too tired. Not even because I planned on drinking, just because of fatigue. And so I just wanted to bring up that point, as I still drive an internal combustion engine vehicle. Um, it's simply just exhausting, um, constantly having to pay attention to every single thing. On my way here out to Starbase today, a stray dog ran right out in front of my car, and that's a regular occurrence. I'm an animal lover, so that's really hard for me to fathom that I could accidentally hit somebody's animal. But they're coming from everywhere. People are walking out in the middle of the road. People are walking down the side of the road. They're fishing off of the pier, in the darkness on the highway. Um, it's a lot to worry about, in addition to getting myself from A to B after, having done a full day or full night. um, yeah, that's really, I just wanted to add that in there, and I just really hope that this comes to fruition sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and
That's
I would just add to that, because I've driven on that road several times. Some people drive really fast on that road. What is it, Boca Chica Boulevard? Some people drive really fast on that road, like
Yeah, and it's
crazy.
there's no divider, and then there's the big fuel trucks, so like the liquid oxygen tankers and the nitrogen tankers and the methane tankers, and they're actually really good at staying in their lanes. It's more just like the tourists, and just anybody really, especially once they come upon Starbase in the distance. It's like all of a sudden there's no, it's obviously, it's a very distracting thing. And so when they're leaving, they're texting out pictures, and I'm guilty of that myself just as much as everybody else. I've got my phone mounted, doesn't make it any better, but I don't know. It's just, I really really hope that we can, Elon has said, in a couple of years, or 20 years, or 10 years, or something, that the fact that we allowed, what is it, however many tons of vehicles to be driven by humans, like, we'll think that's crazy. I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but he's so right. And
Yeah.
there's just been so many instances where I'll, glance down or plug my phone in and look back up, and it's like, oh, and I just look forward to the day where not just where, in addition to me being able to transition over to a self-driving vehicle, but the general population as well. I think that it just is, it's a good thing for all people. No matter what they, people say they still want to drive. Okay, that's fine. But, and it brings me back to another comment that Elon said about how he can tell when he sees a vehicle that is in full self-driving versus a human driver. He said he can tell, like it's obvious. The car stays in the center of the lane, it does certain movements, and I just think that that's a really important thing to bring up, and I think it's incredibly valuable for saving the lives of drivers, but also pedestrians and people people on the side of the road, children, animals, all of it.
Yeah, while you're just having mentioned Starbase, I just want to mention anybody who's got the chance, if you get the chance to go to Brownsville, Texas, and go see Starbase, it is an amazing. You mentioned something about driving there, and it's distracting when you see it. It is an amazing sight. Be careful when you first see it. Be careful with your driving because she's got a point. But go down and check out Starbase and watch for the Kirsch Kona. And say hi to Jessica if you see her. And Jessica was very helpful to me, by the way, the first time I went to Starbase with some tips, which I have shared with others about, there's no bathroom within like 30 minutes. There's no public restroom. And bring water. So it can get hot out there, and there's no restaurants, there's no place to get anything. So make sure you prepare yourself for going out there. It's not like the middle of the desert, but it's 30 minutes from anywhere. So thank you, Jessica, for that tip, and I would definitely encourage others to go visit. And with that, I think we've pretty much covered the Tesla napkin math. I really appreciate people having this conversation with me and giving me some pushback and some things to think about. And thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the space now, and I want to thank everybody for participating and listening. Oh, there's an applause button. I don't know how you did that, but it's really cool. All right, thanks, everybody. Bye bye.